Hey, one more thing before you go. What happens when you move to a completely different country? You're hit with challenges in grief and motherhood all at the same time. You lose your mother unexpectedly, followed up by two miscarriages, and you come to the realization that you must address the grief and the pain in order to heal. After going on a crucial journey, my guest, Katie Rosler, learned the power of grief in our lives and how it can affect us both in a positive and a negative way. When she thought she had a handle on everything, then the pandemic hit, and Katie realized that she needed to use her skills and her experience to help people through a new methodology of understanding grief. Welcome to One More Thing Before You Go. I'm your host, Michael Hurst. This is That Thing About the New Face of Grief. Katie Rosler is an author, a transformative grief guide, and a licensed professional counselor from the USA living in Munich, Germany. Her career has taken her on a journey of working in private practice in 2 countries in residential facilities, homes, and schools, as well as speaking to a variety of corporate and nonprofit groups. Katie's a wife, a mom of 3, and loves spending time by the water. She's the author of a new book entitled The New Face of Grief, Transform Pain into Empowerment. And we're going to talk to her today about how you too can take your grief and transform it into more empowerment for yourself to move forward in a very positive way. So, welcome to the show, Katie.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much.
I'm kind of looking forward to this. As I had said before, we both understand that typical and standard methodologies of going through grief or getting through grief are kind of I won't say antiquated, but I will say antiquated in my opinion at certain times. So this is going to be fun.
I agree.
I like to, as my viewers and my listeners understand, like to know more about you and how you got where you're at. So let's start with, where did you grow up?
That's a great question. The southeast of the United States. I'm from a military family, so we moved every 2 to 3 years. So I don't really have a place that I call home other than that region. And I'm a beach baby because we were always near the beach. But my family is primarily Mississippi, Alabama, Florida. And so that's where everybody ended up after our military family moves.
That's really interesting. I've got family in Mississippi, in Alabama, and Florida.
Wonderful.
Like unique little world, right? We're all one big happy family, as they say. What was your family? I mean, you said military. So what was your family like? Was your father military, or your father and your mother both military?
Just my father. My father was in the Air Force. He served for 28 years. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And then I think later on did some like part-time work. And then when my parents divorced, she went to law school. That was always her dream. And since we moved so much, that prevented her from being able to like really live that dream. And so when they ended their marriage, that's where she went. She went to law school, became a lawyer, and did that until the day she died.
You know, sometimes the life brings us a new chapter, and that chapter is always a positive thing, and it allows you to kind of grow and move forward. Do you have any brothers, sisters?
I do. I have a younger brother, and I like to like gloat on him a little bit. He's a marathon runner. That's not his profession, but he's definitely one that you meet and you go, you're meant to be a runner. So, and he has a beautiful wife and a wonderful little son.
Outstanding. That's pretty cool. I know you went to university. You attended the Mississippi State University when you first started your academic career, right?
Yes. Yeah. I originally went for physics pre-med and was like, okay, I'm going to be a doctor. And then after the first semester, I realized that the professors in the physics department were, I like to call them not my people. I was probably a little too extroverted for them. And so talkative Katie and very personable decided the psychology route was a better fit. I took a gen psych class and was like, oh my gosh, this is like makes everything make sense over the last 18 years of my life. All the moving I did, studying people, understanding why they do what they do, it was totally up my alley. And so did my bachelor's in psychology there, and then went on for my master's in marriage and family counseling at the College of William and Mary in Virginia.
That's I will say that it's a very diverse group to study all at once with the psychology, basically, and the family practice. Did that kind of was that something that well, you just said it actually, so I really shouldn't reiterate that, but you realized that when you were in university already, right?
Yeah, so I knew that I wanted to do psychology, and pretty soon after deciding to change my focus, I realized I wanted to be a counselor. We had gone to family counseling as a family through the divorce process, and I thought, you know what, I actually really want to do that. I'd always been the listening ear to my friends and the advice giver or the person that helped somebody work things out just naturally, and it just fit. It was really truly the calling that I had, and it was my mom, of course, when I called her that day and was like, I'm changing my major, I'm not going to be a doctor. It took her a little bit, but then she realized 100% like, this is what you're meant to do.
This works. It's life always takes us in the journey I think we're supposed to be. And I had started my academic career as going to be a journalist because my father was a journalist. And everybody said, oh, you got to do what your dad did. You got to do what your dad did. And I tried it and I kind of worked it a little bit. But while I was there, they had a police academy that was within the same university that I started with. And I kind of went, criminal justice. I think I'm going to try that. Everybody went, what do you mean you're going to do that? It's like, yeah. And I spent my career as a cop instead of a journalist. And
Awesome.
Ironically enough, I'm circling back to that. It's just kind of bizarre how that works out.
True. Yeah.
So after changing courses, you opened up your own practice as a therapist, correct, in family and counseling. How'd you get into the grief end of it?
The grief came later. So yeah, I did. I worked in residential. I did in-home counseling. That's the time that I was doing my residency for my license, and then opened a private practice. And we decided to move to Germany. I met my husband in that time. We'll get into that. My husband is German, and we decided to move to Germany. So I let go of the practice, was a stay-at-home mom with our first daughter, pregnant with our second. We moved to Germany, and I opened a practice here probably about a year after my second was born, and did couples counseling here. Expat couples really struggle with the transitions and the adapting to the culture, and especially if one of the members of the relationship is from this country or from Austria, it's not, of course, they're not having a challenging time adapting. And so it can be really hard and stressful in the relationship. Seeing it in my own marriage, it made sense for me to help others in theirs. And since I had that background, I was really happy to step in and really start to work with people here on that. And then from there, I did that for a few years. And at the end of 2018, I got the call that my mom was found and she had died in her sleep. And it was unexpected. We were not aware of any health issues that would cause this. And that is where everything started spinning in a direction that I had not expected to go. The following year in 2018, I had 2 miscarriages, and then started 2020 with, this is going to be the year of like, just take a pause and relax. And then the pandemic hit. So we all took a pause and relaxed, because especially in Europe, we were on real heavy lockdown and good, some good and strong restrictions. So I had to take a pause, and I started really heavily getting into my grief work, even more than what I had in 2019. And that was the point where I started to realize that grief isn't just about death. We associate that word only with death. And in reality, grief is an experience we go through throughout our lives. We experience it when we move, when we have a relationship end, a breakup or divorce or separation. We have it when we don't reach a dream that we always wanted to achieve, or our child goes a different direction than we had desired for them to go. We lose a job, lose a home. This all causes grief. And the way I was able to realize that was I was experiencing this like loss and this, of all these losses that kind of compounded on each other. And then I hit a point where I was like, I've felt this way before. And it brought me back to my teen years when my parents divorced. And it was also a shock to the system that they were divorcing. And it was just this, my whole world was changed overnight by one decision. And I experienced so much grief over years and did not recognize that's what it was because, again, nobody died. So when I come to this realization in 2020 that people around me are grieving the loss of how their lives were, grieving how their children's schooling is going, like everything. It was just grief, but nobody understood that's what it was. They were anxious, they were angry, they were scared, they were sad, they felt empty. And I was over here going like, guys, it's grief. Like, guys, I'm in it too. And I feel it. And I know like I can help you. And that is the start of my book, The New Face of Grief. I started writing it exactly for this situation of, hey, we're all going through grief. And in fact, we've gone through it throughout our lives. We just don't know it because the definition to grief is about a death or a major loss and not some of these things that's hidden in grief. That's what became important to me, was to start to teach people, hey, you've experienced this before and you actually know how to get through it, whether it's because of a death, whether it's because of a change or adapting to something, a health condition, all of these things. So my goal is to empower people to see where they've come from already and to learn how to not run from those negative emotions and such. So your first question was, how did you come to grief? It came to me, and then it showed me a whole different way of looking at it, from a whole, I guess, like a 360 perspective of it, and then taking a step back and going, oh, wow, this is bigger than what we're being taught in the world, and then wanting to change that.
That's profound, actually. I can understand it from several different perspectives. Obviously, we've all lost people, and I agree with you. People usually attribute grief to the loss of somebody, at the death of somebody. But I was made aware of it while I was grieving the loss of my career. I was injured in line of duty, and I was told I couldn't be a cop anymore. And it abruptly stopped my life. I was told I would be in a wheelchair, actually, for the rest of my life. I'm not. I'm attached to this, so I can't stand up at the moment. But it's a unique process to really come to understand that our grieving process isn't limited to just death. It's limited to job change. It's limited to losing your job, and you're right, last year, an amazing, unfortunate number of individuals, I'm sure, just exploded with grief because they had no understanding of the sudden loss of so many things. So many things. How did you understand, breaking the mold of grief in helping to people transform from that? We all know grief as like 5 steps, typically, is what we think of, these 5 different steps. And they don't necessarily have to go right in order, but sometimes people think they do. You go through anger, depression, denial, acceptance, and so forth. Do you have a different perspective on that?
So in the book, I do address, the second part of my book, the stages of grief, but I'm very clear in that it's a controversial topic nowadays. Right. Some people are all for it, some are not. But Dr. Kubler-Ross came up with these stages for people who are finding out they had a terminal illness. And then from there, started to realize that the family members of those people also were experiencing these particular stages or themes throughout the experience of that person's life before they died. And then psychologists and counselors and psychiatrists were like, whoa, hold on, we're seeing grief with other things too, and other deaths. And so there is some truth to what she found, because there are some themes. I like to call them more themes of how we act, how we feel. But it's very subjective. There's a variety of ways it's experienced. And I address that in the book. Like, anger is is an energy that wants to create or destroy. So we always think, anger is like, I just want to like lash out at the world. And in reality, sometimes we create some amazing community organizations because of our anger of what has happened. Or we go and, make some huge changes in our lives that help us to, find someone new, a new love, or create things. So I look at the stages or phases as a tool of, hey, what might be happening to us, and how do we sort of frame this, but look at it in a bigger context of what is the bargaining stage? Well, bargaining stage is actually our desire to have control. We want to believe we have control over all of these things in our life. And so when we bargain with the whole, well, if I had done this, or if I do this, this can change. It's this like last little bit of, it's a bit of the temper tantrum of, I want this to happen the way I want it to, before we're able to sort of accept and release. And for me, grief, the true definition is it's an emotional experience we go through when we realize life is not going the way that we think it should or thought that it would. And once you let go of that and you start to see that positives and negatives happen to all of us, no matter if you're a good person or not a good person, and that's all subjective terms too, then you start to just realize it's all life, and it's all here to help us learn and to heal and grow in different ways. So I like to use the phases in a sense of, here's a framework. And then the third part of the book, I start to address the other experiences, the physical responses we have in grief, how humor is used so often in grief in a variety of ways, and how it can be healthy, how community is important, though we feel very lonely in our grief. Why we feel that loneliness. I address that, and what solitude is versus isolation. Because sometimes our brain thinks, well, if I want to pull away from everybody, or everyone's pulling away from me, there's something wrong with me, versus grief has a bit of a cocoon experience to it, right? We need to pull away and understand what we're going through and what we feel, so that we know what we can ask for from others and find those safe people. I think there's a place for the phases and stages, and I know there's some people in the grief world who would disagree with me, but I think you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, like there's some purpose to it. There was some value to it, and there still is. It's now about shaping it into the world that we live in now, and how we as humans are going about our day to day, and how grief looks in this society.
Yeah, I agree with that. You brought up something in your talk here a few seconds ago. People tend to kind of pull themselves into a cocoon, pull themselves away from everybody else, kind of hide in their own little world. We've all seen it with either relatives. We may have even experienced it ourselves and recognized it later. Do you think it's normal to have somebody just kind of shut the rest of the world off so that they can grieve, like leave me alone? I'm just going to, I'm grieved, I'm depressed, I'm angry, I'm just going to just leave me alone. Do you think that, I won't say do you think that's normal, but I'll ask that, is it normal?
Yes, and I think it's very typical. I think we need that, because if we're always getting external opinions about what we're feeling or thinking, or judgments or opinions, it can skew what we need to be really experiencing in that process. So by stepping away and going, but with intention, right, not to be spiteful, not to, I'm just going to hide away from everybody, but to really go, I need this time for me. And maybe you communicate that clearly. Hey, everybody, I am going to be pulling away. I'm not responding to your messages. I'm not going to answer your calls. This is how it is. We need to sit with, what is it am I feeling? Is it a loss? Is it a frustration? Is it sadness? How can I start to heal this? Like, what is it that I thought life would look like? And where is it now? And what's good about where it is now?
Right.
And what's bad about it? What do I not like? And allow that time to go inside and go, okay, grief is, everybody thinks grief is up here in our minds because we like think about the person or think about the thing and da da da. But in reality, grief is in our hearts and our bodies. We store it. That's why people who think, well, I'm over that, that's like years ago. And then all of a sudden they're like explosive reactive anger at times when something triggers it. They haven't. So we have to recognize that our bodies need that space, and it cannot always be because we're talking it out to everybody. I mean, I'm a therapist. Talk therapy is great, but it can't solve everything, and it doesn't always help. Sometimes you do need to have that time where you go inward and go journaling, whatever it might be, to what is going on with me and what do I need, and is it that I need to kind of just I love the term cocooning, because I think if you really look at the life phase of a caterpillar to a butterfly, we always forget cocooning is like a metamorphosis. Okay, cool. But do you remember that a metamorphosis, go back to science, they turn to mush in the cocoon. Yeah. Like it's no longer a caterpillar, not a butterfly. It is mush. We have to go through that to transform. We have to feel it. We have to be uncomfortable. We have to be angry. We have to start to shift our way of viewing the world and ourselves to become that butterfly. We can't just go pretty in the cocoon, yay, and after a week we pop out and yay. No. I talk about that in the book, how important it is that this beautiful metaphor we like to use, this analogy of growing and changing and becoming this butterfly, means we have to completely deconstruct what we were before and reconstruct us.
That's brilliant, actually. Do you think, at what point do you think somebody that's trying to be helpful should or could intervene? If somebody has concluded themselves or kind of sequestered themselves enough where, their life is stuck, they're not eating, they're not sleeping, they're not getting up, they're not getting out, the house is a mess, they're staying in bed. At what point do you think maybe somebody needs to kind of intervene?
So that's a great question, because it's the same as in therapy. If somebody doesn't want to be helped, then you can't help. So if somebody keeps coming to my office to work on something, but they don't actually really want to work on it, I'm going to be doing all the work, and they're just going to keep coming in. Often I see when people want to help, it's for their own reasons. Well, I'm worried about them, but also it's like, I don't think they should grieve like this. It shouldn't look like, they should have already been done. Why aren't they getting up and, showering and things? And then there's those who are truly like, I'm concerned that they feel alone, and I just want them to know that they're not. And when you come at it from that framework, then you're not sending them, poems about how wonderful life is and stuff that really is going to make them want to like delete your phone number. You're going to be going, I'm going to bring you over a meal, and I'm going to clean your bathroom. You can stay in bed. You're not forcing them to change. Right. You're providing some things that help remind them they're not alone. You're saying, hey, I'm going to put a funny movie on with you tonight. You can watch it or not. But I've heard from Katie on this podcast that humor can be a great tool of relieving grief in small amounts so that we don't feel so like drowning. Things like that. I mean, it's really about where our heart is and where our mind is. And often we think we're coming at it from a servant mindset, but in reality, it comes from the construct of what we think it should look like, what's unhealthy, what's safe, what's not. Now, and I address this in the book, if somebody is in an unhealthy mindset, then yes, there is that place where you want to come and try to intervene. But the truth is, we also have to respect people's journeys.
Right.
And none of us wants to hear that, it's okay to allow somebody to go do something to themselves or hurt themselves. But they would do it whether you were there or not. Like there's that piece where you have to respect everybody's journey and their process is going to play itself out. You can plant the seeds to help them to come out of it, but you can't force them. And that's that control piece. We want to save people. We want to make sure they're okay. Sometimes their journey is, as you and I know, is hit rock bottom, the darkest moments. And then here we are now.
Exactly. Yeah, that's great. Great advice, actually. How do you think? I mean, I know you kind of touched on it a little bit ago, but if you don't mind, we can expand upon that. And I know people are probably tired of hearing about COVID and how it's affected everybody, but I know that typically, and this happened within our household, as well as the world, basically. Everybody's world went from being normal to all of a sudden this chaos just came in. You couldn't go. People were working from home. People were losing their jobs. I mean, everything changed completely. My wife, for us, without sounding selfish, for us, some of the changes were positive because she got to work from home for a year and a half because of the situation, and that gave us a new normal, so to speak, because it allowed us to spend time in the morning. There wasn't an hour and 20-minute work, a commute to work for her each way. Didn't have to worry about her being on the road with all the other accidents and things like that. We got to go out on the back patio, enjoy life in the morning. 30-second commute we set up an office in the front room. 30-second commute to the office. The dog loved it. I loved it. We had lunch every day together. It created a new normal. And then when she went back to work, we started going through grief again because it was like, hey, we lost that.
Yeah.
Do you think that some of the processes you have in your book that you helped develop, that would help to work through those things too as well, correct?
Definitely, because a big part of it is empowering you that once you've gone through the grief and you've figured out what it is that you kind of wanted life to look like. And you guys are great at being adaptable to, well, life is not what we thought it would look like or should look like. And now here it is. And wow, we see the beauty, like of what it could be. Now with the switchback, and honestly, I think especially in the US, there's going to be some shift in how people work.
Yep.
People don't want to have the hour and 20-minute commute anymore. They've seen
Absolutely.
that they can be just as effective at home, that they can have a much more peaceful and less stressful life. So I think some of those shifts are going to start to occur, and this will be around the world. And employers need to start thinking about how to make that fit because you want to keep those great employees.
Mm-hmm.
The book itself will definitely give you a framework of, okay, so how do we go from here? What do we do with this feeling? Largely when people were sitting at home and those who didn't find the positives in it, or it took a while, they were sitting with their past. A lot of us kept ourselves busy all the time, saying yes to everything so that we didn't have to feel from things that happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago.
Right.
And all of a sudden we're sitting around and we're seeing our partner in a different way, we're seeing our family members in a different way, or we're alone and we're having to feel what that feels like. And someone who is healed and healthy, when they're alone, it doesn't feel like this, something's wrong with me, complete, like I'm on an island. They'll miss people, of course,
Right.
but there isn't this feeling of like, oh, it's the only way I can describe it. Like, but those who went through that was grief. There were pieces there of disconnect and struggle. And not everybody knew to go, let me go reach out to a therapist or a coach and let me figure out how to get support. Most of us went online in our professions to be able to try to help people like that.
Right.
But not everybody understood that's what they were experiencing. And some went down the rabbit hole of addiction in a variety of ways. And as we've seen in the States and Australia and throughout the world, the suicide rates became very high, especially for teens and young adults, because they didn't know how to sit with not having that connection.
Yeah.
And I think that's a piece where we lack, and I'm a mom of 3 kids, where we lack teaching our children emotional intelligence, how to connect and feel comfortable and safe in their own bodies, and with themselves, and not always need that instant gratification that social media and things bring. And it is very challenging to create that in a teenager amidst today's society.
Yeah, my
It's
kids
really
are my kids are
difficult.
adults now, but I absolutely can understand that people are so connected to their phones, so connected to social media, so connected from that perspective that sometimes it's hard to really get them to understand that there are real relationships out there that you need to develop with
Yeah.
people. My youngest daughter, is she's a social media specialist, a media marketing specialist actually, and that's what she deals with is creating social media for the companies that she's working for. And she comes home and she doesn't want to be on social media. You text her and she
Yeah.
said, well, we talk on the phone, which is,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, thanks. She says, yeah, I do it all day. I don't want to do it anymore. Yeah, now, if anybody's listening to this that knows that my daughter's working for that company, she definitely wants to keep her job.
Right.
She just wants to not do it after she gets home, just to clarify. How do you think we should recognize grief if somebody's going through that? How do we recognize it?
Well, I think it's important we recognize how we're going through it in ourselves, because we're all about saving and helping other people, but we're not about looking in the mirror. Like, that's uncomfortable. So I think, first of all, as you look at your own timeline, your life timeline, the events that happen, kind of like a movie, become your own consultant in a way. Let me watch this movie play out, and where were the areas that, wow, that still hurts? Whoa, I didn't like that happened to me. And they don't have to be big events. They can be situations where you were parented in a way you didn't like, or a sports coach embarrassed you in front of people. Things like that we just hold on to, and then they sort of like build and build and build and build, and then here we are in our work world, and somebody says something to us, and we're snappy at them. All of that builds upon it. But if you don't look at your life like that movie, then you don't get to stop and go, oh, that happened. Oh, and that. And I take my clients usually on a journey through a guided meditation of like, let's look at your lifespan and kind of say, what still hurts? What are the memories that come up? And as soon as you get them out of their heads and into their bodies, like I said, the story is there. That experience comes, the tears flow. And the beauty of that is that they're not scared of it because they realize it's just a memory and it's something that they can feel and experience and heal from. And I teach them how to do that versus continue to suffer and ruminate and wake up in the middle of the night going, man, why did I do that? And those kinds of things. So instead of recognizing grief in other people, I think it's important we're working on ourselves and being honest about it. There's such beauty in saying, man, you know what? The other day I was doing some grief work. Wait, what? You were doing grief work? Yeah, I was working on my grief. And yeah, I haven't had somebody die recently, but I have some stuff in my life that I wasn't happy with how it went. And I have a lot of grief about that. Just having those types of discussions spark for other people, whoa, maybe I need to do that too. Like us talking about grief with your work shift and how your career completely changed. You talk with people about that. This episode will help people go like, oh, wow, I did experience grief in this situation. Or that, the divorce did lead to grief. I was just angry and that's all I thought I was. But now I see I was grieving how life used to be, even if I couldn't stand the person, or how I thought it would be when I married them. And now I know, I need to work on that versus try to fix this other person. Because really, when we're trying to fix other people, it's because stuff's within us that needs to be fixed, but healed, worked on. So focus on yourself and then share your story. You don't have to tell them what it is specifically. You just got to say, I'm working on some things where I thought I would be at this place in my career and I'm not. I thought my kid would have done this and they've decided to go that way. And now I'm having to let go of those dreams. And you normalize it for people that, oh, wow, you're going through grief too. We don't talk about that. We don't put it on social media. We don't share these things.
Right.
But it's happening for all of us. So why not share real life?
Well, I think the art of communication is important. And when I say the art of communication, that means just the ability to recognize that talking is a very valuable asset. Listening is even a more valuable asset that you can have within yourself, because the art of that communication then garners new beginnings, endings, positivity, can release negativity, and can help you move forward in a very positive way just by talking and just by listening.
No, I agree. And I think there's power in when you really listen to someone. And this maybe would give you an answer to your question about how, if we notice someone else is grieving, how do we notice? When you start to hear somebody talk about something and you're like, that kind of sounds like grief, to say, do you think maybe you're grieving? And they might go, well, nobody died. And go, like, but no, but think about it. Like, grief is also like, it didn't work out the way I wanted, or I have to let go of something. There was a loss. It just wasn't a death. That creates that response of like, well, let me think about that.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's very interesting, actually. The all of this that we just talked about, that helped you, that motivated you to write this particular book.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. That was a
Oh,
quick. Yes, all of this is all of it. I mean, the book, it was funny. A lot of people are like, you've got kids and you were pregnant when you were writing this book and all. Like, yeah, because literally I would bring a journal everywhere we went, playground, outside, everywhere, anytime we were driving somewhere, and just writing, because it all was just coming out of me. There was this like, and this thought, and this thought, and this thought, and it was like chapter upon chapter. And I'm a big into mind mapping. And I literally just wrote it all out as this like bubble graph, kind of like mind map. And, you know, the chapters were already there.
oh, that's great.
The stories were there.
Now, you mentioned something there, if you don't mind me touching upon that. You said journaling. And so
Yeah.
you obviously created a book by journaling, but in everyday life, do you recommend that we all journaling? Can you help us understand what journaling actually is?
Yes. I think journaling is a wonderful tool. I would never tell everybody that they need to do it, but I think it's one of those tools that creates self-reflection, allows you to maybe put out onto word, into words the things that come up for you that you maybe wouldn't say out loud to someone. And also there's something about just free writing, here's how I'm feeling today, here's what I'm thinking today, that can spark some pretty powerful realizations. For me, journaling as many mornings as I'm able to, depending on what my day looks like. I even do it in front of my kids because I want them to see this as a healthy habit. For me, journaling is just one of those, like, setting the intentions for the day, sharing where I am in this moment, because I love going back and looking like 4 or 5 years ago what I wrote and being like, whoa, that's a profound thought, or whoa, like, God, I've come so far. Like, so glad I'm not there in my 20s anymore. Often we think, oh man, back then it was so much better. And I read those journal entries, I'm like, no, it wasn't. There were a lot of things going on back then too. So for a great way to start with journaling is to daily just have like a notebook out in a place where you would normally go with a pen. And maybe you start it with like the date and you say, maybe something that you're grateful for. What are your plans for that day or your hopes for that day? And kind of like setting intentions. And then if there's anything that's like weighing on you, something that's still like on your mind, or, I'm really having a hard time with this relationship. I'm really having a hard time understanding this, or I really want to change jobs, whatever it might be, like, just put it on paper and then you close it up and leave it there. And the next day you write again. And then you might see that you start to write more and you want to share more and you want to explain more to yourself, or process out more. And then you just allow that ball to roll. Now, there'll be times, there's even weeks where I don't journal. I just don't force it. I allow it to come as needed, because that for me is what tools are. It's great that we have habits, but then there's these extra tools that help us, and we pull them in as we need them and as we find good support in them, but we don't beat ourselves up when we don't use them. And that's typically what happens when we try to start a new habit. It's like, oh man, I'm supposed to do this. And like, let it go. You didn't. Okay.
Yeah, I think we all have a stigma in regard to that in particular that we need to let go of. And I've had to do it myself in regard to having to let go of, well, that's the normal, and I shouldn't have to do that. I should
Yeah.
want to do that, and trying to create a habit, but you don't necessarily have to create a habit. Just create a create. Can we call it a maybe an updated modern day version of a diary?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And you're creating opportunity by having it in a space that you would easily go to and write. So it's just, hey, it's there if you wanted. And it is. It is totally a modern day journaling is that exactly that, diary, a diary entry. Now, as we know it, growing up, diary entry would be like, and this person liked me, and this happened, and this is just really like a moment in time where we are, and the next day, a moment in time where we are. But I think it's important to incorporate, the practice of gratitude because it's just so impacts, in positive ways our mental and emotional health. Really setting our intentions for the day so that at least in one moment we've thought about ourselves and what we want and not just people pleasing or going crazy doing
Hmm.
everything else. And then doing our own little check-in. How am I? Am I doing okay right now? Like what's going on with me? And then close it up and move on. And that reminds you that the feelings don't have to spill out everywhere. They can be contained in a healthy way.
Do you think journaling can help somebody get through grief?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Often in grief, there are things we wish we would have said or wanted to say, even when it comes to loss that isn't related to death. The things that we're afraid if we said them. Like with my miscarriage, man, there were some things I really wanted to say to people when they thought they were comforting me, and I didn't want to hurt them. Journaling was the best way to just let that out and to say those things and to just, oh, okay, it's out there.
You got it
I've
out.
written it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've throughout this podcast. One more thing before you go. The whole principle behind it is, make sure if you've got something to say it. If you've got something you want to do it, because you never know what's going to change. And it's always nice, and it's much more satisfying to make sure that one more thing before you go, say it, do
Yeah.
it, kind of a
Yeah.
thing. And anger is not a good thing. Um, Depression, anger, depression, everything that, even the stuff that I have gone through, and this is from my personal experience, so I'm not professional at this, but I know that anger can create more anger and more negativity. Depression can create more depression and compound upon itself. Denial can create the issues within themselves. Everything in regard to grief or life in general, you need to kind of manage that to help balance everything for a nice mind, body, soul. So journaling, I think I agree, is a nice way to be able to put all of your thoughts down, and you don't have to share it with anybody.
Right.
It can be yours. You can tuck it away in the drawer. You can put it under the bed, put it under your pillow. Like my sister used to write in her diary, put it under the pillow. Don't touch that. Kind of a thing. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Had you always wanted to be an author, or is that
Oh,
something?
yeah. Yeah. Since I was a teenager, I always thought my mom, my grandmother, and I would write a generations book about life, the things we experienced, or our opinions about things happening in the world. And then when my mom died, one of the first thoughts I had, like that first month or two, was like, well, we're not going to be able to write that book. And I didn't know then that I was going to write the book that I did.
All right.
I honestly thought I was going to be writing a book that maybe one day will come out of me about helping a couple to really create their home that they want emotionally, mentally, where it's not just falling on one side, where they together say, this is what we desire, and we're not going to fall into patterns that our family did or things like that. And I had already started writing chapters for it, just on the side for fun and things. But then this grief book took kind of, like I said, it was like, it just flew out at me like fire. It was like, this is actually needed right now. And so in a year and a half, I went from writing it to publishing it.
Well, I'm going to say that's fantastic that you got the motivation to do that. It's unfortunate that it took a pandemic
Yeah.
to the size that it is to kind of show. But it's a very, very, very positive thing. I've read part of it. I've not read all of it yet. Forgive me for that. I'm squeezing in there, but what I've read so far is a brilliant display of a step-by-step guide to help you through managing your grief in a very good way, in a positive way, and helping you to move forward in life and letting go of certain stigmas that might be in your way.
Yeah, thank you very much. My intention wasn't for people to think, oh, this is a Pollyanna view of grief. It was, I mean, as you know, I'm very real. I share the stories. I'm very honest about the experiences. But to say, but that doesn't have to define you or the
Right.
experience you have at the end of it all.
Exactly. 100%. 100%. What inspires you?
What inspires me right now is these 3 kids that I have. They're 7, 4, and 9 months old. And my 7-year-old comes with such profound thoughts. The other day we were driving. She's like, Mom, what if we are all God's toys? I mean, I like playing with toys. So like he likes playing with us. And I was like, girl, you are on like a whole nother like level of philosophical processing.
Wow.
And then I have this 4.5-year-old who just like says it as it is. This is what I think. This is what I want. And then I've got this 9-month-old who's like exploring the world and like, you know, can I get into this? Can I open that? Can I do this? And you're just like, whoa. That's all. It's still in all of us, but then
Right.
we let society's boxes, you know, take it away from us. And so that's what inspires me right now is these kids that are like crazy amazing.
That's an amazing inspiration. Our children are our gifts. Sometimes people forget that our children are our gifts, and we have to help nurture that and grow it and love it and keep it moving forward. Sometimes we get frustrated. Sometimes we get extremely happy.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes we're sad, but that's part of life.
Yes. Oh, there's grief in parenthood too. So I address that in the book. There's grief. We
Absolutely.
have to let go of who we thought we would be or our old selves. So, yes, yeah. But they are a gift when you look at them with that light. Yes.
100%. Let's talk about how to connect with you and how to find your book, please.
Yes, you can find out about my book through the book website, thenewfaceofgrief.com. You can find me at my website, katierussler.com. That's ROSSLER. And I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. So looking for katie.russler on Instagram. I do a lot of videos there, a lot of teaching there as well. On LinkedIn, you'll find my podcast that I've been on, videos that I've done. So just search Katie Russler LPC.
And I found I think I've listened to a couple of meditations from your site, that site you just mentioned. And they were really good, actually. Everybody needs to come see it. This is one more thing before you go. So before we go, is there any words of wisdom you'd like to share with our listeners and our viewers?
So I want to remind people how strong they are. You know, over our lives, we're conditioned to believe that we're not, that we need certain things to make us feel better. We need to eat that thing, drink that thing, buy that thing, and it's going to make us feel better, watch that thing. And in reality, you are so capable of handling anything that life gives you without the crutches that end up keeping us from really experiencing our own personal growth. And when you start to embody that again and remind yourself, like, no, I can handle this, you're going to find that your grief healing is more radical and doesn't take as much of this painful period. You'll see the pain in a different way as well. So that's what I want to leave with you guys with, is like, you're just amazingly capable. It's just we've been conditioned to believe we're not, sadly. That's what works in marketing, right? You know, you
Absolutely.
need this because you feel this. We're so capable, we actually don't need those things.
Excellent words of wisdom. I really appreciate it. Katie, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for sharing your personal journey as well as your expertise and your profound wisdom. I really appreciate it, especially in helping people move forward in their grief journey, no matter what it happens to be. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate that.
Thank you for joining us on One More Thing Before You Go. And don't forget to download our free app located in the App Store and on the Google Play. Take one more thing before you go anywhere you go. It's a compliment to SuperPass, our sponsor. You can find us on any one of your favorite listening platforms as well as on here on YouTube. I want to thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate what you have shared with us. Katie, again, thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of One More Thing Before You Go, a unique conversation about life. If you like our show and want to know more, check out our website at beforeyougopodcast.com. That's beforeyougopodcast.com. Tell your story, share your expertise, contribute to the blog, and subscribe to the newsletter. You can find us as well as subscribe to the program and rate us on your favorite podcast listening platform.
And one more thing before you go. Have a nice day, have a nice week, and thanks for listening.
One More Thing Before You Go, a unique conversation about life podcast, is a creation of One More Thing Productions, established 2010, all rights reserved.